Hey guys, tonight we begin with the extraordinary life of a warrior woman, not a queen, not a myth, but a Viking Shieldmaiden. Fierce, battle-trained, and feared by enemies across the North Sea, she was the embodiment of Norse grit and feminine power. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter the world in the dead of winter, because of course you do. The fire's barely lit, the midwife's drunk on honey mead, and the longhouse smells like smoke, wet fur and boiled cabbage. Your mother is lying on a pile of wool blankets that haven't been washed since last harvest, gripping a wooden spoon like it's a weapon. Which, to be fair, it often is. You don't cry, you roar. The midwife flinches. Your father, who's seen 3 raids and 1 troll, or so he claims, looks at you and mutters, "She's going to be trouble." The rest of the village nods like this is a diagnosis. You're a girl, which means your life is already a gamble. You're either going to die young, get married off, or, if you're lucky and just scary enough, you'll skip all that and earn the title that most girls only hear about in sagas, Shieldmaiden. Your crib is a reused goat trough. You share it with a wool scrap, a carved owl, and possibly a spider named Hilda, who refuses to move out. There are no lullabies, just loud men snoring and someone sharpening an axe in the corner. Every few minutes, a hound walks by and licks your forehead. This is the Viking version of a baby monitor. Your family consists of 2 brothers who already smell like war, a grandmother who talks to ghosts, and an aunt who's been married 3 times, all to men who mysteriously died during training accidents. You're the 4th girl born this year, and the only one who didn't arrive screaming. You arrived glaring. Your name is chosen based on 2 things: how loud you were, and which ancestor hasn't had a baby named after them in a while. You end up with something like Freydis or Brynhild, which translates loosely to, "May the gods have mercy on anyone who insults her." You survive your first night, which is more than many can say. The fire keeps you warm, the milk is fresh, the lice arrive promptly. By the end of the week, the village is already calling you the loud one. Someone carves you a wooden dagger for teething. You don't chew on it, you practice your grip. You're 2 years old, teething, and dangerously mobile. The world is your battlefield, and your first weapon is a sheep bone. Viking childhood is not gentle. There are no plush toys, no pacifiers, no safety rails. What you get is whatever didn't make it into the stew pot. Your favourite toy is a carved wooden horse with 1 leg missing and bite marks from 3 cousins. You also have a ball made of pig bladder and a stick, which you use interchangeably as a wand, sword, and disciplinary tool on anything smaller than you. Your playground is the mud outside the longhouse, which you share with livestock and future trauma. There is no such thing as childproof. Everything is sharp, flammable, or edible, and sometimes all 3. You once swallowed a fish hook. The village cheered when it came back out. Games are simple and brutal. Catch the chicken ends in scratches. Who can throw the rock furthest ends in bruises. Raid the neighbour's firewood pile ends in social tension. Your favourite game is ambush your cousin, which ends when someone cries and an elder yells, "Thor's beard, not again." You learn social rules fast. Share food, but only after you've licked it. Never touch someone's comb, and always give the chieftain's dog the first bite, or it will take it anyway. With part of your hand. Formal education? Not exactly. You learn what you see. You see your mother grinding grain and patching clothes. You see your father cleaning weapons and arguing about taxes paid in fish. You see your older siblings fighting with sticks and trying to impress each other by lifting goats. You try that too. It ends poorly. By age 4, you can start a fire, skin a rabbit, and recognise when adults are lying to you. You have a talent for sneaking and stealing honey cakes. You are caught regularly. It builds character. Some children are quiet and obedient. You are not one of those. You get dirt in your hair, blood on your tunic, and pride in your little chest. Your grandmother pats your head and says, "She's got the look of someone who'll grow up to terrify men." You don't understand yet, but you like how it sounds. You are 5 years old, and you've learned two important things. Fire is life. Everything else is loud and freezing. Your education begins early, not in a classroom, but in the cold, hard reality of village life. Forget chalkboards and reading circles. Your first lesson is, don't fall in the fjord. The second is, if it's steaming, don't touch it. You fail both. The concept of school does not exist. Instead, you're educated through the classic Norse curriculum: observation, repetition, and being yelled at by exhausted adults holding sharp tools. Math? That's counting sheep and spoons. If you lose either, you get a hands-on lesson in consequences. Reading? You're shown runes carved into stone and told, that means death. You nod and memorize it. Vocabulary grows fast when half the words mean hit, bleed, or run. Your mother teaches you how to grind grain without losing fingers. Your father teaches you how to hold a blade without looking like you're going to cry. Your uncle teaches you how to gut a fish, and your aunt teaches you how to gut a man, theoretically. No one uses baby talk. Adults speak in normal voices, even when you don't understand half of what they're saying. You learn fast, or you get left behind, both physically and socially. There are songs, yes, but most are about blood feuds or dying gloriously in battle. You hum them while doing chores. Your lullaby is a saga about a warrior getting his ribs pulled out through his back. It's weirdly soothing. By age 6, you know how to sharpen a blade, tie a knot, and tell when the goats are acting like there's a storm coming. You also know how to lie with confidence, sneak extra berries, and throw a rock with tactical precision. You're not being raised. You're being forged, like a sword, in fire, by people who haven't smiled since last solstice. And yet, there's pride. When you get something right, no one claps. They just grunt, nod, and let you do it again. This time with slightly less supervision. You're not a child in the modern sense. You're just a very small adult with fewer responsibilities and slightly more snot. Puberty arrives like a bad omen, unannounced, inconvenient, and completely uninterested in your feelings. You wake up one morning slightly taller, slightly smellier, and filled with a rage you can't explain. Your voice stays the same, but your insults hit harder. Your face decides to grow more oil than a lantern, and your sweat could knock out a wild boar at 20 paces. Welcome to Viking adolescence. You now bleed monthly. No one gives you a pamphlet or a talk. Your mother hands you a scrap of wool and says, "Get on with it." You do, because you have no choice and she's already gone back to skinning a rabbit. Your body is changing, but your chores are not. You still haul water, chop wood, clean fish, and wrestle goats that hate you on a personal level. You're just doing it now with back pain and a mysterious desire to stab things. Everyone says this is normal. Your training intensifies. You no longer spar with wooden sticks. You use real blades, dull ones at first. Not because they don't want you to get hurt, but because they don't want to replace you yet. You are encouraged to hit harder, move faster, and never, ever cry unless it's from blood loss or joy. You're expected to fight the boys as equals, and when you beat them, you're told not to brag. You do anyway, quietly, to the goats. Socially, things are weirder. Some girls start plaiting their hair with care and flirting with boys. You braid your hair so it doesn't get in your eyes during battle drills. When boys flirt with you, you ask if they can spar. Most back away slowly. A few try, fewer try twice. Your evenings are spent cleaning weapons, eating stew, and trying not to think too hard about your future. You don't dream of weddings or silk tunics. You dream of standing in a shield wall, shoulder to shoulder with warriors who don't ask if you're sure you're strong enough. You haven't earned your place yet, but you're close. And when you catch your reflection in the blacksmith's shield, eyes fierce, hair wild, arms bruised, you don't see a girl anymore. You see a threat. You turn 12, which in Viking years means you're now considered almost an adult, and just old enough to ruin your own life with steel. On your birthday, your father hands you a gift. It's long, wrapped in cloth, heavy and cold. You unwrap it carefully, expecting a broom or maybe a loaf of dry bread. Instead, it's an axe, iron-bladed, leather-wrapped, and sharp enough to split logs, bones, or egos. You name it immediately. Not because you're sentimental, but because it feels like you should fear it a little less if you treat it like a friend. You choose something appropriately terrifying, like wolf biter or mittens. You go outside to try it. Your first swing misses the target completely and nearly takes out the fence. Your second swing hits your own foot. You don't cry. You just sit there, bleeding quietly, wondering if this counts as a rite of passage or just a bad idea with a metal edge. Your uncle bandages your toe and tells you, "That's how you learn." Then he laughs and offers you a pig's ear. You decline with dignity. The next few weeks are full of trial and error. Mostly error. You practice on logs, hay dummies, and occasionally the training post, which now leans slightly from all the off-centre hits. Your form improves. Your confidence grows. Your foot still throbs. You learn how to oil the handle, how to sharpen the blade, and how to swing without twisting your back like an old drunk trying to dance. You train until your hands blister, then train more until the blisters turn into calluses. Sometimes you train alone. Sometimes with your cousin who is 2 years older and insists on spinning in circles before each strike like he's performing for gods who are definitely not watching. One day, you block a blow, counterattack, and land a clean hit on your opponent's ribs. They drop their weapon and wheeze something about seeing stars. You don't gloat. Much. That night, you lay your axe beside your bed. Not for decoration, not for tradition, but just in case someone breaks in and mistakes you for anything other than a problem. You're not just learning how to fight. You're learning that you were built for it. It starts, like most bad ideas, with someone opening their mouth. You're at training, holding your axe and minding your own business, when a boy, taller than you, cockier than necessary, and freshly smug from winning a sparring match, looks at you and says, "Are you sure you want to fight? You don't want to break a nail." You don't respond, not verbally. Instead, you step into the ring, nod to the instructor, and get ready. The boy smirks. He's already half-turned toward his cheering friends, one of whom whispers something that sounds like, "Go easy on her." You don't go easy on him. Your first hit is blocked. Your second grazes his shoulder. Your third lands square in the middle of his chest, knocking the wind out of him with a sound like a dying goose. He recovers quickly, swings wide, misses. You duck, sweep his legs, and take him down into the mud like you've been dreaming about this moment your entire life. He tries to rise. You plant your foot on his chest. Silence. The boys stop cheering. The instructor clears his throat. The goats watching from the edge of the field seem vaguely impressed. You step off, toss your braid back like a battle flag, and walk away without a word. The boy coughs, mutters something that might have been "good match," and limps off to tend to his bruised everything, especially his pride. Later, one of the elders pulls you aside. You brace for a scolding. Instead, they grunt and say, "Good footwork." Your mother gives you a nod. Your father just raises one eyebrow, then offers you a larger portion of dried fish at dinner. In Viking culture, this is considered a standing ovation. The boy doesn't look at you for a week. When he finally does, it's with the cautious respect one might give to a bear they've once accidentally poked with a stick. You learn something important that day. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to smile to be liked. And you definitely don't have to apologize when someone else's underestimation lands them in the mud. Victory smells like sweat, dirt, and slightly overcooked stew, and you'll never forget it. There's no ceremony, no glowing runes, no prophecy, no dramatic lightning bolts splitting the sky. Just a cracked shield, a busted lip, and an old warrior grunting, "She's ready." You've spent the last few years fighting, sweating, and earning every single bruise like a badge of honor. Your mornings begin with drills. Your nights end with soreness in muscles you didn't know existed. You can now identify injuries just by how they ache. Sprain, dull throb, bruise, sharp sting, ego? Still bruised from losing to your grandmother in a wrestling match last week. Your braid is longer now, not for style, but for practicality. You tie it back before battle so it doesn't get caught in your helmet or grabbed by someone with poor decision-making skills. Some girls weave in beads. You weave in bits of leather and teeth, not yours. Probably. Training has shifted. It's less about whether you can swing an axe and more about whether you can keep your head when someone's trying to take it off. You spar with men now. No one goes easy on you, and you don't expect them to. You've learned that hesitation costs you more than pain. It costs you respect. Your shield arm is stronger than your dominant one. Your fingers are permanently wrapped in leather or scabs. You don't win every match, but you never stop swinging. That's what earns their trust. Then, one day during a sparring session, your shield splits. A clean hit from someone twice your size. It cracks down the middle, splinters flying. You toss it aside and keep going, barehanded, bloodied, and just angry enough to make it interesting. You lose the match, but no one forgets what you did. And that's the day the elders start using your name in a new tone. Not as a child to be corrected, but as a fighter to be counted on. No one says, "You're a Shieldmaiden now." But they no longer glance sideways when you take your place in the shield wall. The braid, the blood, the bruises, all earned. You haven't just become a Shieldmaiden. You've become someone others watch when things go wrong, to see what you'll do. You finally make it onto a longship, and within the first hour, you deeply regret every choice that brought you here. The deck is slick, the wind is rude, and the rowing bench is basically a wooden insult to your spine. You are packed elbow to elbow with other warriors who smell like old leather, dried sweat, and optimism that died 3 days ago. There is no personal space. You shift slightly, and your knee touches someone's axe. You shift again, and someone sneezes into your hair. A seagull screams overhead, as if mocking your life choices. Rowing is not glamorous. It's a full-body punishment disguised as transportation. Your hands blister by mid-morning. By noon, your blisters have blisters. Your palms feel like someone grated them with a cheese scraper. You are told this means you're doing it right. There is no relief, only rowing. Your arms are sore, your legs are numb, and your seat is damp in a way that raises existential questions. Every stroke brings you closer to glory, and also, probably, tendinitis. Meals on board are bleak. Dried fish that tastes like the inside of a helmet, hard bread you could use as a weapon, and water that's technically still water, if you're generous. You chew slowly and contemplate mutiny. At night, you sleep curled against the side of the ship, using your shield as a blanket and your axe as a pillow. You are gently rocked by the waves, the snoring of the crew, and the lingering suspicion that this entire voyage was planned by someone who hates fun. But despite all this, the pain, the cold, the constant dampness, there's something else too. The thrill of the open sea, the camaraderie of the crew, the quiet pride that yes, you belong here. You earned your spot. You're not a tag-along. You're not a mascot. You're a warrior, and warriors row. When the shore appears in the distance, a dark, unfamiliar line on the horizon, your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and your heart pounds with anticipation. You are exhausted, hungry, mildly seasick, and absolutely ready, because the boat isn't just a vehicle, it's a crucible, and when you land, you'll be forged. The coastline appears like a secret no one wanted to share. A quiet village. Thatched roofs. Smoke drifting peacefully from chimneys. Chickens. Probably a baker. Maybe even a small hopeful goat. You're going to destroy it. As your longship hits the shore, your stomach drops. Not out of guilt, but out of a very real, very physical panic. This is it. Your first raid. Real steel. Real enemies. Real consequences if you trip in the mud and accidentally stab yourself before anyone else gets the chance. You disembark. The beach is soft, which is not helpful. You nearly twist your ankle before even reaching the village. Battle cries echo around you, loud, primal, and mostly improvised. Yours sounds like a goat coughing. It's fine. You're new. You charge. Your first opponent is not a warrior. It's a chicken. It runs at you aggressively, flapping like it has something to prove. You sidestep, barely, and swing at a man holding a pitchfork. He drops it and runs. You chase him briefly, then remember you're supposed to be looting. You break into a storage hut and find cheese. A lot of cheese. You grab some. It feels like a victory. Outside, chaos, shouting, fire. Someone trips over a bucket. Someone else starts singing for no reason. A warrior next to you yells, "To Odin!" and falls into a well. You begin to understand why Viking raids are both feared and deeply confusing. Eventually, the resistance fades. The village is pacified, which is a nice way of saying burned and robbed. Your crew gathers what's useful. Silver, tools, livestock, a very nice stool. You limp back to the boat with a bruised shin, a stolen spoon, and half a wheel of cheese. It's not what you imagined. No slow-motion glory, no epic speech, just adrenaline, noise, and the vague realization that you may have screamed for the entire 20 minutes. But you're alive. You stood your ground. You didn't drop your weapon. And even though your tunic smells like goat panic and your ears are still ringing, you feel it. The thing the older warriors talk about in low tones around the fire. That rush, that certainty, that power. You didn't just survive your first raid, you participated, and next time, you'll be better. The battle is over. The village is behind you, smoking, raided, and probably confused about what just happened. You're back on the longship, slumped over your oar, smelling like someone grilled anxiety over a fire made of damp regret. Your tunic is torn. Your boots are muddy. There's a cut on your shoulder that you didn't notice until someone else pointed it out. "That'll scar nicely," they say with a grin, as if that's helpful medical advice. Your hands are blistered, your thighs are cramping, and there's a definite chicken feather still stuck to your braid. You're not sure if it's from a fight or lunch. Possibly both. The rowback is quieter. No one's shouting, just groaning, chewing, and the occasional sarcastic retelling of who tripped over what. Someone insists they single-handedly fought off 5 armed villagers. You watched him drop his sword in a puddle and cry. No one corrects him. He needs this. Food is passed around. Dried fish, hard bread, and, most sacred of all, a flask of ale. It's warm. It's bitter. It tastes like triumph and mould. You drink anyway. You expected victory to feel louder, but really, it feels like bruises and a deep aching satisfaction that settles somewhere between your ribs and your spine. You did the thing. You crossed the sea, held the line, and came back with cheese and a story. By nightfall, you're back at camp. The fire crackles. The meat sizzles. Someone's already asleep, snoring directly into their helmet. You sit cross-legged with your fellow warriors, staring into the flames like you're waiting for the gods to say something. No gods speak. But someone passes you a roasted turnip, which is almost the same thing. There's laughter now, the low, worn-out kind that comes from people who survived something stupid together. You laugh too, not because it was funny, but because it happened, and you were there, and you didn't die. As you settle in for sleep, curled up with your shield and your still dented helmet, you know this is the first of many raids, the first of many aches. But for tonight, you rest. You earned it. Raiding season ends with the cold, and so does your brief flirtation with glory. You return home expecting rest, maybe even praise. What you get is winter. Full-blown, nose-biting, morale-destroying Viking winter. The fjord ices over. The longship is dragged inland and flipped upside down like a retired dragon. You pack away your armour, knowing full well that your off-season is just survival on hard mode. The chores double. The daylight vanishes. Your motivation follows. You chop firewood until your fingers go numb. You haul frozen buckets of water from an icy stream that stares back at you like it wants you dead. The goats, who hate you on a spiritual level, now rely on you for warmth and hay. You don't like them, but you respect their stubbornness. They return the favour by screaming at 3 a.m. The food situation deteriorates immediately. Fresh meat becomes a distant memory. You now live on smoked fish, dried fish, and fish pickled in something that might also be cleaning vinegar. For variety, there's turnip mash. It doesn't help. You eat in silence, bundled in every layer you own. You smell like wool, damp fur, and regret. Your hair hasn't been fully dry in weeks. Your toes feel like strangers. Your shield collects dust. You polish it anyway, mostly to remember what happiness looked like. Your family is around constantly. Too constantly. The longhouse is crowded, smoky, and filled with arguments about who keeps moving the firewood and why the stew smells like socks. You train outside in the snow just to get away, even if your fingers freeze to the sword hilt. And yet, something changes. You get stronger. You get colder, emotionally and physically. You start to appreciate silence. You stop noticing the smell of pickled everything. You endure. One morning, the snow begins to melt. You hear the first bird song in months, a shrill little thing that sounds like hope and a possible migraine. You walk to the fjord. The ice is cracking. Spring is coming. Raiding season will return. And when it does, you'll be ready. Angry, underfed, and itching for action. Winter tried. It didn't win. You survive winter. Just barely. Your reward? Marriage proposals. They begin innocently enough. A local farmer's son shows up with a bundle of dried fish and a hopeful grin. He tells you that you'd make a strong wife. You respond by asking how well he can swing an axe. He says he doesn't do weapons. You say you don't do men who can't hold a blade. He leaves. Quickly. The next one tries harder. He brings you a gift, a comb carved from antler. You accept it politely, then use it to scratch your hound behind the ears. He never returns. Soon, it becomes a trend. Young men arriving with tokens and nervous energy, hoping to tame the village's most eligible Shieldmaiden. The problem is, you don't want taming. You want raiding, sparring, and maybe the occasional feast where no one talks about goats. Your aunt says you should consider settling down. You tell her you'll settle down when your axe rusts. She mutters something about dying alone. You counter with dying gloriously, which frankly sounds better. One particularly bold suitor challenges you to a duel. He says it's tradition. You agree. He gets a bruise shaped like your shield and learns a valuable lesson about underestimating women who train in the snow for fun. Eventually, the offers stop. Word spreads. You're not interested. Not in being someone's wife, not in cooking stew every night, and definitely not in arguing about who gets the good fur blanket. You want more, and less, all at once. More battle, less small talk. More glory, less goats. To be clear, you're not against love. You've just never seen anyone who makes your heart beat faster than a war drum. And until you do, you're perfectly fine sharpening your axe in peace. Some of the village girls whisper that you're too proud. Some of the village boys whisper that they're terrified. Both are correct. You spend your evenings on the training field instead of weaving. You polish your blade instead of planning a wedding. And you sleep with your axe beside you, not out of loneliness, but because it's the only companion that never talks back. You've fought before. Raids, skirmishes, petty clan feuds over goats and insults. But this is war. It starts before dawn with the kind of silence that feels like the earth holding its breath. The enemy is no distant village of scared farmers. These are warriors, armed, armoured, and already sharpening their blades with your name in mind. You don't get a stirring speech. Just your chieftain muttering, "Don't die stupid," and walking off to tie his boots. You nod. That sounds about right. You stand in the shield wall, shoulder to shoulder with people you've fought beside and occasionally insulted around the cook fire. Your shield feels heavier today. So does your breathing. Someone nearby throws up. Someone else sings. And then it begins. The first clash is chaos. Shields slam. Swords scream. Someone dies. Probably more than one someone. You block, Swing, duck, stab, repeat. It's not strategy. It's survival at the speed of panic. Your shield cracks. You switch to your axe. Your axe breaks. You pick up a spear that's been dropped by a man who no longer needs it. You lose track of time. You forget what language you're shouting in. You only know your feet hurt and your arms don't stop moving. At some point, you fall. Not dramatically, just a stumble. You land in the mud next to a corpse that looks a lot like someone you knew. You can't hear anything but the thudding of your heart and the distant roar of battle. A shadow looms. You roll. A blade misses you by a hair. You grab a rock. You use it. It works. Somehow. When it's over, truly over, the field is quiet again. Except now it's not earth holding its breath. It's the dead who won't breathe again. You sit there covered in blood that isn't entirely yours, trying to remember how to feel things like fear or pride or even hunger. A bird lands nearby and immediately regrets it. You survived. You shouldn't have. But you did. And when someone asks you how, you'll shrug and say, "Didn't have anything better to do." Which is true, but also not the whole story. After the battle, things change. You're still you. Same boots, same axe, same mysterious stew stain on your cloak that refuses to leave. But people look at you differently now. Not just like a fighter, like a story. Someone starts calling you the one who wouldn't die. Another calls you Goat Hammer, which is less flattering, but gains traction because of one unfortunate incident involving a fleeing enemy and a nearby goat. You don't bother correcting them. Let them talk. The truth is messier and less interesting. When you walk through the village now, people move. Not away, just aside. Like they're not sure if you're going to ask for help or issue a challenge. You nod politely. They nod back, very cautiously. Children whisper your name and dare each other to poke your shield while you're not looking. They never succeed. You once caught a boy mid-sneak and handed him your axe. He froze. You said nothing. He returned it and fled. You haven't seen him since. Smart kid. Warriors now ask for your opinion before a raid. Not just out of politeness, but because you've been there, done that, and came back with more scars than excuses. You're no longer that loud girl who hits hard. You're a veteran, a problem solver, a cautionary tale with a great arm swing. Strangers know your name, or at least something close to it. A visiting merchant bows too deeply and calls you Mistress of Blades. You correct him by spitting into a bucket and asking if he brought better cheese this time. He nods so quickly he almost faints. At night, around the fire, you hear your own story told back to you. Slightly wrong, heavily dramatized, and with new details involving thunder, a glowing raven, and a berserker kiss. You say nothing. It's funnier that way. You didn't ask for fame. You certainly didn't smile for it. But now that it's here, you carry it like your shield. Well worn, slightly dented, and always ready. You used to wonder if people would take you seriously. Now you wonder if they'll stop shaking long enough to actually speak. You're not the youngest anymore. There's a new crop of wide-eyed girls tying their braids too tight, gripping their axes too loose, and talking too loud about what they'll do in battle. You see yourself in them, but with less bruising and more optimism. They watch you closely, not like a hero, more like a storm that could start swinging at any moment. You've earned that. Your joints ache in the mornings. Your sword wrist pops when it's cold. You have a scar across your ribs that itches whenever it's about to snow. You don't heal as fast as you used to. And when you do, the pain lingers like an old drinking buddy who doesn't know when to leave. But you're not softer. You're just harder in the right places. You train less to prove something and more to stay sharp. You eat slower, sleep lighter. Speak only when there's something worth saying, which means half the Longhouse still hasn't heard your voice. When younger Shieldmaidens ask how to win their first fight, you say don't die. When they ask how to make someone respect them, you say break their nose, then help them up. And when they ask when it stops being terrifying, you tell the truth. It doesn't. You just get better at pretending. You still raid, though not as often. Now when you do, people check to see if you're coming. If you are, they breathe easier. If you're not, they check their armor twice. Your axe is worn, the handle wrapped in new leather, the blade notched but still sharp. It's seen more than most warriors. It's outlived all your suitors. You've thought about hanging it up. But then someone says something stupid, or a threat appears on the horizon, and you remember. You're not done. You never wanted to be legendary. You just wanted to fight, to survive, to carve your place in a world that didn't think you should have one. And somehow, through blood, fire, and sheer refusal to quit, you did. You're not just a Shieldmaiden, you're a warning. And the next time someone asks if you still fight, you'll smile, just a little, and say, only when it's necessary. And sometimes, just for fun.
Long before hospitals and white coats, the Greeks believed the best way to get healed was to take a nap, inside a temple. This wasn't lazy medicine. It was called incubation, and it was sacred. If you were sick in ancient Greece, you didn't book a doctor. You packed your bags and made a pilgrimage to the sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of healing, often at Epidaurus, where marble colonnades met the scent of laurel and sacrifice. Upon arrival, you'd perform purification rituals, bathe in sacred water, offer a small sacrifice, often a rooster, and prepare for sleep in the abaton, a dark, quiet chamber where patients laid down on mats, sometimes with snakes slithering freely around them. Yes, snakes. They were sacred to Asclepius and symbolized renewal and rebirth. The idea was simple but mystical. Fall asleep in the presence of the god, and he would visit you in a dream. These divine dreams weren't just symbolic. They were prescriptions. You might see Asclepius touch your wounded leg, or hand you a healing herb. In the morning, you'd report your vision to a temple priest, who would interpret it like a spiritual pharmacist and advise you on what action to take. The process wasn't passive. The journey to the temple, the purification, the prayer, all of it primed the mind and body for healing. Some scholars argue it was a form of early psychosomatic therapy. Others call it theatrical placebo. But whatever it was, it often worked, or at least was believed to. Patients sometimes left cured, others left inspired, but almost all of them left with a story. And the temples proudly displayed these tales inscribed in stone. Testimonies of restored sight, healed limbs, and divine interventions. Not clinical trials, sure, but compelling testimonials written in marble. The ritual blurred the line between medicine and religion, dream and diagnosis. It was less about fighting symptoms, more about aligning with divine balance. Healing wasn't just about the body, it was a conversation with the cosmos. And if you were lucky, the cosmos answered back, softly, sometime around midnight, in the shape of a god, a whisper, and a snake curled at your feet. Now, let's leave the peaceful sleep chambers of Greece and head east, to ancient Mesopotamia. Here, healing was more like an exorcism than a nap. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, illness wasn't just biological, it was personal. Sickness was thought to be the work of malicious spirits, sent by angry gods, jealous neighbours, or vengeful ghosts. And the cure? Trap the demon in a bowl. These so-called incantation bowls, also known as Babylonian demon bowls, were the Mesopotamian equivalent of spiritual bug zappers. They were simple ceramic objects, placed upside down and buried beneath the thresholds of homes. But their purpose was anything but decorative. Each bowl was inscribed, spiralling inward in Aramaic or other local languages, with protective spells and divine names. The writing was dense, deliberate, and a little unhinged, invoking angels, saints, and cosmic powers to bind whatever malevolent force might be lurking. The demon wasn't just expected to leave the body. It was meant to stay trapped in the bowl forever, like an ancient spiritual Tupperware. Some bowls even featured crudely drawn images of the offending spirit, bound in chains, looking rather uncomfortable. The image was meant to humiliate the demon,
sort of like magical mugshots. Others went further, including family names, domestic complaints, and even mentions of rival sorcerers. It wasn't just about healing, it was about defense. In a world of curses, evil eyes, and whispered spells, you needed spiritual insurance. These bowls were typically buried under doorways, thresholds, or the corners of homes. Why there? Because demons, much like nosy neighbours, are said to linger at the edges, waiting to slip in unnoticed. The bowls served as invisible bouncers, keeping the bad vibes out and the family intact. While modern medicine might scoff, the deeper logic is strangely relatable. These rituals externalized invisible threats, gave fear a name, a shape, and a container. And in doing so, they gave people a sense of control in a chaotic world. So next time you feel something's off and can't quite explain it, maybe check under your doormat. Who knows? There might still be a dusty bowl, silently doing its job, holding back the shadows with little more than ink, clay, and ancient Mesopotamian hope. While Mesopotamians were busy trapping demons in pottery, the ancient Egyptians turned to something more sensual: plants, perfumes, and potions. For them, healing wasn't just about restoring the body, it was about balance, harmony, and divine scent. And at the heart of this fragrant medical tradition was the blue lotus, a flower with hypnotic power and spiritual prestige. The blue lotus wasn't just beautiful, it was intoxicating, literally. Soaked in wine or infused into salves, it was used to induce mild euphoria and ease pain, grief, or spiritual distress. Ancient paintings show partygoers clutching lotus blooms during feasts, priests offering them in temples, and even mummies buried with them. The flower was thought to connect the living with the divine, opening the mind to healing dreams and sacred visions. But lotus wasn't the only tool in the Egyptian medical chest. Far from it. Egyptian medicine was a dazzling mix of the empirical and the esoteric. They catalogued over 800 remedies in texts like the Ebers Papyrus, a 20-metre scroll filled with everything from crocodile dung suppositories, yes, really, to honey-based wound dressings. Some of these treatments were surprisingly effective, especially the ones involving garlic, frankincense, and myrrh, all known today for their antimicrobial properties. Others were more spiritual than scientific. One common remedy for toothache involved placing a cooked mouse on the sore spot. Another involved chanting spells to drive out illness as if it were a disobedient servant. The line between prayer and prescription was thin, and doctors, called SWNW, often doubled as priests. The temples themselves acted like hospitals. The sick would come to be treated with a combination of poultices, incantations, and offerings to deities like Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plagues. If you recovered, great. If you didn't, well, perhaps the gods were testing your resolve. But make no mistake, Egyptians weren't blindly magical in their approach. They performed surgical procedures, set bones, and drained abscesses. They even understood the pulse and examined urine to diagnose illness. In fact, some Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen later borrowed heavily from Egyptian methods. Still, the rituals always lingered, because in Egypt, healing wasn't just a physical process. It was a sacred act, a way of aligning the flesh with the eternal. And sometimes, all it took was a flower, a spell, and a little bit of faith wrapped in linen. While the Egyptians were wrapping the sick in scented oils, far to the north in Siberia and across the indigenous Americas, healing took on a different urgency, not treating the body, but retrieving the soul. Here, illness wasn't just a symptom. It was a sign that part of your spirit had wandered off, stolen, frightened, or misplaced. And the only person who could go get it back was the shaman. Shamans weren't doctors in the clinical sense. They were intermediaries, part priest, part healer, part cosmic travel agent. Their healing rituals could involve hours or even days of drumming, chanting, fasting, and hallucination. The purpose? To enter an altered state of consciousness and journey into the spirit world, where they'd battle hostile entities, negotiate with ancestors, or bargain with nature spirits, all to recover the missing piece of a patient's soul. These weren't metaphorical journeys. For the shaman and the community, they were very real. Tools of the trade included drums, believed to be the heartbeat of the earth, animal masks or cloaks representing the spirit guides, and occasionally psychoactive plants to open the inner vision. One popular tool among Amazonian shamans was ayahuasca, a powerful brew that induces visions, purging, and what one might kindly call revelatory chaos. Soul loss could be caused by trauma, grief, or breaking taboos. Symptoms included chronic fatigue, depression, or bad luck, what today might be called psychosomatic or psychological distress. But instead of therapy sessions, a healing ceremony might involve calling your name into the forest, dancing around a fire, or listening to your healer chant the spirit back into your chest. In some traditions, the shaman would physically act out the struggle, shaking, miming a battle, or pulling invisible threads from the body to symbolically remove the sickness. In others, they'd blow sacred smoke over you, touch pressure points, or whisper prayers into the ear of a sleeping child. There was no sterile distance. Healing was communal, emotional, and mythic. It was about storytelling, memory, and restoring the invisible bonds between a person and the world around them. Because in these cultures, you don't just catch a cold, you catch a crack in your soul. And if you're lucky, someone brave enough will go into the dark to bring your spirit home. As shamans searched for missing souls in the spirit world, the ancient sages of India turned inward, mapping the rhythms of life into something more structured, more methodical, and just as mystical, Ayurveda, meaning knowledge of life. This healing system was less about fighting disease and more about maintaining harmony between body, mind, and universe. If your digestion was off, it wasn't just lunch. It was a cosmic imbalance. According to Ayurvedic theory, every person is made up of 3 doshas: Vata, air and space; Pitta, fire and water; and Kapha, earth and water. Your unique combination determined not just your health, but your temperament, personality, and favourite breakfast. A healer's job wasn't to eliminate symptoms, it was to bring your doshas back into balance using herbs, diet, massage, meditation, and if needed, a thorough oil bath. Yes, oil. Ayurvedic treatment loves oil. Warmed sesame or medicated ghee is drizzled onto the forehead in a practice called Shirodhara, meant to calm the nervous system and open the third eye. Other therapies involve full-body oil massages, detoxifying enemas, herbal smoking, and even induced vomiting, called vamana, which sounds brutal but was considered deeply purifying. But this wasn't just a set of folk cures. Ayurvedic texts like the Karaka Samhita, dating back to at least the 1st millennium BCE, outlined detailed anatomical theories, surgical techniques, and philosophical foundations. Ancient Ayurvedic practitioners were trained observers, diagnosing disease by examining the pulse, tongue, eyes, and even the patient's voice. Still, the spiritual aspect was never far behind. Health was considered a moral state as much as a physical one. Greed, anger, or excess desire could disrupt the doshas just as easily as spoiled yogurt. Meditation, chanting, breath control, pranayama. These weren't just spiritual practices. They were daily medicine. And then, of course, there were the herbs. Turmeric for inflammation, ashwagandha for vitality, neem for purification. Each plant wasn't just a remedy. It had personality, energy, and a story, often linked to gods, saints, or cosmic events. In short, Ayurveda didn't see illness as a random misfortune. It saw it as a message, a whisper from within that something had drifted off balance. The cure wasn't war on disease. It was realignment, harmony, a nudge back to the sacred rhythm of life. Preferably with warm oil. Lots of it. While India focused on balancing the doshas, ancient China developed its own intricate system built on a similar concept of harmony, the flow of energy, or qi, pronounced qi. In traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, illness wasn't just the presence of disease, it was the blockage or misdirection of life force. Think of qi as a kind of invisible river flowing through your body. When it stagnates, floods, or dries up, things go wrong. When it flows freely, health is restored. At the centre of this worldview were two guiding principles, yin and yang, the complementary forces of cold and hot, dark and light, passive and active. A good healer didn't just identify what was wrong. They asked, which element is overbearing? Which one is missing? Are you too much fire? Not enough water? Is your spleen holding a grudge? Practitioners examined your tongue, listened to your voice, and took your pulse. Not once, but at several spots, each corresponding to different organs. Your liver might be angry, your kidney might be fearful. The diagnosis often sounded more poetic than pathological, but that didn't make it less powerful. Treatment often involved acupuncture, inserting hair-thin needles along meridians to unblock energy paths and encourage natural flow. While the thought of needles may not sound comforting, many found the experience strangely calming, sometimes euphoric. But TCM wasn't a one-trick philosophy. It also employed cupping, moxibustion, burning herbs near the skin, qigong, energy movement exercises, herbal medicine, and meticulous dietary plans. Ginger, ginseng, licorice root, each prescribed with careful intention. One of the most revered texts in this tradition is the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, a medical philosophical dialogue written around 200 BCE. In it, the emperor and his physician discuss not only the nature of illness, but the rhythms of seasons, emotions, and even politics. The body, after all, was a miniature version of the universe. In Chinese medicine, you weren't just a sack of organs. You were a living ecosystem, a part of the cosmic order. A stomachache wasn't just from bad dumplings. It could be unresolved grief. Healing was never purely physical. It was ethical, emotional, elemental. And when the elements fell out of tune, the goal wasn't to fight, but to restore harmony, like tuning an instrument, or uncorking a stream, with needles, and maybe a touch of burning mugwort. Across the vast and varied landscapes of Africa, healing has long been a community event, a blend of medicine, ritual, and ancestral power. Unlike Western models that isolate the patient in a clinic, traditional African healing involves the family, the ancestors, the village, and the spirits. In many cultures, illness is not just a personal ailment, it's a social rupture, a cosmic imbalance that must be addressed holistically, preferably with drums, smoke, and a very concerned chicken. Take the Sangomas of southern Africa, spiritual healers and diviners who serve as the bridge between the living and the dead. A Sangoma doesn't just diagnose symptoms, they read bones, literally. A handful of bones, shells, and trinkets is cast on a mat, and their position reveals the story. It's a form of spiritual radiology. The ancestors speak through the scatter. Once the diagnosis is made, whether it's a curse, ancestral displeasure, or emotional trauma, the healing begins. Rituals may involve animal sacrifice, plant-based remedies, or initiation dances. Music plays a crucial role. Drumming, singing, and movement aren't entertainment. They're tools to shift energy, invite spirit guides, and enter trance states. The goal? To heal not only the body, but the soul and its unseen ties to others. Plants, too, are central. Traditional healers, known as herbalists or inyanga, maintain deep knowledge of local flora, roots, barks, leaves that treat infections, fever, infertility, or pain. Some herbs are boiled into teas, others are burned, rubbed into skin, or consumed in complex brews during rituals. This isn't casual foraging. It's a sophisticated pharmacy passed down through generations, often protected through secrecy and spiritual initiation. Illness might also come from violating taboos or social norms, failing to honour elders, speaking ill of a spirit, or stepping over the wrong grave. So healing isn't just medical, it's moral. You may need to confess, apologise, or undergo purification. And yes, this might involve chicken blood, sacred ash, or a very awkward family meeting. The deeper idea is clear. You're not a disconnected individual. You're part of a living network, ancestral, spiritual, ecological. When something goes wrong in you, it echoes through the web, and the healer's job is to listen, interpret, and stitch the web back together, with herbs, chants, and the wisdom of the ancestors watching from the firelight. In many Native American traditions, healing is not about fixing a part of the body. It's about purifying the whole person. Illness, whether physical or emotional, is seen as the result of imbalance between the self, the community, the spirit world, and nature. And so, one of the most profound healing rituals across many indigenous nations is the sweat lodge, a ceremony of heat, prayer, and spiritual rebirth. The lodge itself is humble, a dome-shaped structure made of willow branches, draped in blankets or hides. Inside it is dark and intensely hot. Heated stones, known as grandfathers, are placed in a central pit, and water infused with sacred herbs is poured over them to create steam. The air becomes thick with heat and memory, and participants sit in a circle, often naked or minimally clothed, guided by a spiritual leader or roadman. This is no sauna. It is a womb. The lodge represents the earth's belly, a place of renewal where one can let go of toxins, pain, and emotional burdens. Songs are sung, prayers are spoken, sometimes in traditional languages nearly lost to time. The process usually happens in rounds, each more intense than the last, and each accompanied by a different theme: gratitude, forgiveness, letting go, or calling upon ancestors. The purpose isn't just to sweat out sickness. It's to listen, to yourself, to others, and to the spirits. In the darkness, stripped of distractions, people often report visions, emotional breakthroughs, or deep, unexpected peace. It's not always pleasant. The heat can be overwhelming, and the discomfort intense. But that's part of the medicine. Other healing rituals include smudging, burning sacred herbs like sage, sweetgrass, or cedar to cleanse a person or space, and healing songs, which are passed down orally and considered living medicine. Some nations employ sand painting, where colourful patterns made of crushed stone are used in healing ceremonies to realign spiritual forces. But at the heart of it all is connection. To the land, to the ancestors, to the elements. Healing isn't done in isolation. It's done in relation. Through ritual, the individual is brought back into harmony with the world. And whether it's through fire, steam, or song, the goal is always the same: to return to balance, to remember who you are, and to walk again with strength upon the sacred earth. After travelling from Greek dream temples to sweat lodges under the stars, one thing becomes clear. Ancient healing was never just about the body. It was a full spectrum experience: physical, emotional, spiritual, and social. While the tools varied, lotus salves, demon bowls, needles, drums, the intention was remarkably consistent: restore balance. In every corner of the ancient world, health was defined not as the absence of disease, but as the presence of harmony. Harmony between body and soul, between humans and nature, between this world and the unseen one, whether through the cosmic pulse of ki, the rhythm of drumming feet in the dust, or the soothing trance of temple incubation. Healing rituals worked because they gave meaning to suffering and agency to the sick. They also recognized something modern medicine often forgets. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We want to understand why we're in pain. We want to believe that there's something we can do about it. Ancient healing gave people both: an explanation, be it spirits, imbalance, or ancestral wrath, and a path forward, often as communal as it was curative. These rituals were powerful, even when they were medically ineffective. A Mesopotamian demon bowl might not have killed bacteria, but it might have calmed the mind. A shaman's soul retrieval may not have mended bones, but it could soothe trauma in ways language couldn't. Even where the science fell short, the storytelling, the symbolism, and the ceremony had genuine therapeutic value. And here's the twist. Many of these ancient insights are coming full circle. Modern medicine now embraces mind-body approaches, meditation, visualization, and even plant-based therapies. Psychedelic-assisted therapy echoes shamanic journeys. Hospitals incorporate music, aroma, and culturally sensitive rituals into care. It's almost as if, after centuries of scientific dominance, we're remembering something our ancestors knew instinctively. Healing isn't just about chemistry. It's about connection. So what do ancient healing rituals teach us? Not just about herbs and chants, but about ourselves. That we're not machines to be fixed, we're ecosystems to be nurtured. That a whispered prayer, a rhythmic drumbeat, or the scent of sacred smoke can sometimes reach places a scalpel cannot. Because deep down, healing isn't just a medical process. It's a human one. And the ancients, in all their mysticism and messiness, understood that better than most. Before there were crowns, amulets, or rings set with gemstones, there were shells. Tiny, perforated mollusk shells, strung together and worn not for beauty alone, but for meaning. Some of the oldest known jewellery in human history comes from places like Blombos Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists uncovered shell beads over 75,000 years old. These weren't just random decorations. They had been deliberately pierced, smoothed, and arranged. In other words, they were designed. So why would early Homo sapiens spend precious time threading together shells, teeth, bones, and stones when survival was already a full-time job? The answer seems to lie in communication. These ornaments weren't just aesthetic. They were a language. A necklace might signal your role in the group, your family lineage, or your readiness to mate. Jewellery was a wearable story, one that spoke without words. And while today we think of jewellery as luxury, the earliest forms were sourced directly from nature's scraps: bird talons, animal teeth, pieces of amber, and carved bone. Nothing was wasted. Everything held potential meaning. A predator's tooth worn around the neck didn't just look cool. It said, "I survived this." It was protection, bravado, and spirituality wrapped into one primitive pendant. Interestingly, these early beads often came from the sea, suggesting that even inland communities valued coastal materials. This implies a level of trade and exchange, possibly among early tribes. Jewellery, even then, was portable culture, a way to carry identity and relationships across landscapes. But there's also a spiritual layer. Some anthropologists believe these objects had magical or ritual purposes. Shells were connected to water, bones to ancestors, teeth to strength. They weren't just decorative, they were talismans, worn close to the body to ward off illness, misfortune, or evil spirits. In essence, the birth of jewellery marked a turning point in human cognition. It showed an awareness not only of self, but of how the self appeared to others. A shell on a string became more than decoration. It became a statement about belonging, about survival, about meaning. So no, ancient humans weren't primitive in the way we once thought. They were already artists, curators, and storytellers, carving their identity into bone and threading their legacy through a hole in a shell. As human societies advanced through the Paleolithic period, jewellery took on deeper layers of symbolism, becoming markers of life and death, of belonging and legacy. During the Ice Age, adornments weren't just worn, they were buried, sometimes with great ceremony. The earliest graves, like those found in Sungir, Russia, dating back over 30,000 years, tell us that even then, jewellery had profound significance. One such grave held a child, perhaps no older than 10, laid to rest in a tunic adorned with over 4,000 ivory beads, each one painstakingly carved from mammoth tusk, each one taking hours to make. The entire process likely took thousands of hours, all for a child. What does that tell us? That jewellery had transcended ornamentation. It had become a sacred rite, a farewell, and maybe even a promise to the next world. These Ice Age pieces weren't made in haste. They featured symmetry, repetition, and rhythm, showing a surprisingly developed aesthetic sense. Pendants shaped like animals, patterned beadwork and bracelets carved from reindeer antler suggest both technical skill and spiritual symbolism. Jewellery was no longer improvised from scraps. It was a dedicated craft, and the materials told stories of place and identity. Baltic amber has been found far from its point of origin, suggesting long-distance trade networks. Jet, a black fossilized wood, was prized for its deep luster and was used in mourning jewellery even millennia later. In some cultures, red ochre, a pigment resembling blood, was used to dye beads or burial garments, perhaps as a symbolic link to life force or rebirth. Jewellery during this period likely signalled social status too. Who you were, where you belonged, how much labour your group was willing to invest in your decoration. These all mattered. A person buried with elaborate adornment was being honoured, elevated. Perhaps they were a leader, a shaman, or simply deeply loved. And of course, there's the possibility that some jewellery served as love tokens, clan symbols, or coming-of-age markers. But without written records, these remain educated guesses, stitched together from excavation sites and careful analysis. Still, what remains is striking. Even amid ice, danger, and survival struggles, humans took the time to create and wear beauty. Jewellery, even then, was a quiet rebellion against the cold indifference of nature, a declaration that life and identity mattered. As humanity moved into the Neolithic and Bronze Age, jewellery evolved from tribal expression into tools of power and protection. Amulets, pendants, and charms were no longer just aesthetic. They were infused with intention, magic, and the divine. These small objects bridged the gap between the human and the supernatural, offering protection from curses, disease, and bad luck. Or so people believed. In ancient Egypt, the use of jewellery as amulet reached new levels of complexity. Scarabs, ankhs, and the Eye of Horus weren't just pretty shapes. They were spiritual armour. The scarab, representing rebirth and transformation, was often buried with the dead to ensure safe passage into the afterlife. Children wore fish-shaped amulets to ward off drowning. Pharaohs were buried with gold jewellery shaped like cobras and falcons, invoking gods to guard them even in death. Materials mattered. Gold wasn't just precious, it was considered imperishable, associated with the flesh of the gods. Lapis lazuli, with its deep celestial blue, was thought to grant vision into the divine. Turquoise, carnelian, and faience each had symbolic value. Jewellery became a way of coding cosmic ideas into wearable personal items. In Mesopotamia, similar beliefs thrived. Cylinder seals carved with protective deities were worn on the body or around the neck. Beads carved with sacred symbols were believed to repel disease and demonic influence. Even kings were often shown wearing heavy jewellery, bracelets, collars, earrings, not just for wealth display, but for spiritual defence. The ancient Greeks, too, adopted amulets for protection. Soldiers carried engraved gemstones featuring gods or mythological beasts into battle, believing they'd grant strength or shield them from harm. One popular figure was Gorgonean, the head of Medusa, worn to petrify evil itself. These amulets weren't just for the elite. Common people wore them too, sometimes in base metals or clay rather than gold. But the intention was the same. Whether around the neck, wrist, or sewn into clothing, jewellery became a daily interface with the divine. It served as medicine, shield, and whispered prayer. At its core, ancient jewellery had become a tool of survival, not in the physical sense, but spiritually and socially. It allowed humans to carry the gods with them, to turn fear into something wearable, and to face the uncertainty of life with beauty and a little borrowed power from the universe. As civilizations grew more stratified, jewellery evolved from sacred object into a visible marker of hierarchy. No longer just protective or symbolic, it now screamed, "I have power, I have wealth, and you don't. From Mesopotamian queens to Chinese emperors, jewelry became political, its gleam a reflection of divine favour and elite identity. In Sumer, one of the earliest cradles of civilization, archaeologists unearthed astonishing examples of elite adornment in the royal tombs of Ur. Queen Puabi, buried around 2600 BCE, was entombed in layers of gold and lapis lazuli, headpieces, necklaces, large gold earrings, and an elaborate beaded cape made from precious stones. Her death was a performance of wealth, but also a spiritual declaration. Her jewelry carried her authority into the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians took this to even greater heights. Pharaohs wore elaborate broad collars, heavy with gold, turquoise and enamel, symbolizing divine kingship. Their crowns were inlaid with serpents to signify protection and sovereignty. Even children of the elite were adorned with amulets and rings. Jewelry wasn't just for ceremony, it was everyday diplomacy, a language of status in plain view. In ancient China, the elite wore jade, not gold. Jade wasn't merely beautiful, it symbolized purity, immortality, and moral excellence. Confucian ideals even linked jade's physical properties to virtue, smooth yet strong, radiant but not flamboyant. Emperors were buried with jade burial suits sewn together with gold thread, believing it would preserve the body and elevate the soul. Across the Mediterranean, the Mycenaeans and later the Greeks and Romans continued this trend. Gold wreaths shaped like laurel leaves were worn during public rituals and funerals, echoing both wealth and cultural refinement. Roman senators flaunted signet rings, each engraved with their family crest, acting as both a security key and a status badge. And let's not forget the role of jewellery in court politics. A lavish necklace could be a gift of favour, or a trap, drawing someone into dangerous alliances. Jewellery was used to secure marriages, to signal allegiances, and to curry favour with gods and kings alike. In short, by the time writing appeared, jewellery wasn't just decoration or magic, it was infrastructure. It carried the weight of law, religion, dynasty, and class. It was the silent language of command, worn around the throat, draped across the chest, or flashed with a subtle lift of the hand. Behind every shimmering crown and engraved ring stood someone with dirt under their nails and fire in their forge, the ancient jeweller. As societies became more complex, so did the techniques of adornment. Jewellery was no longer just strung beads or hammered metal. It became art, engineering, and alchemy, often centuries ahead of its time. In Bronze Age civilizations, artisans began mastering the use of metalsmithing tools, techniques like granulation, fusing tiny gold spheres to surfaces, and filigree, delicate wirework, required precise control of heat, materials, and geometry. The Minoans of Crete, for example, created jewellery that looked almost modern. Bees made of gold with tiny suspended drops of honey, lions mid-roar, goddesses with wings outstretched. These weren't just trinkets, they were mythologies in miniature. Egyptian goldsmiths took it even further. Using blowpipes to control fire and open moulds for casting, they produced elaborate collars and amulets that still stun the modern eye. One of the finest discoveries from Tutankhamun's tomb was a scarab pectoral containing Libyan desert glass, a material formed by ancient meteorite impact. Jewellery, here, wasn't just decoration, it was cosmic. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, craftsmen were setting stones into gold, developing primitive drills with string and bow mechanisms, and perfecting intaglio carving on seal stones. These engraved pieces weren't only beautiful, they served as identification, signatures, and, in some cases, magic charms. Perhaps most remarkable was the use of lost wax casting, an innovation that allowed for complex, hollow metal forms. First appearing in Mesopotamia and Egypt, this technique involved sculpting a model in wax, coating it with clay, then heating it until the wax melted away, leaving a mould for molten metal. The result? Rings, earrings, and pendants that were both lightweight and ornate. By the time of the Etruscans and Greeks, jewellery had become a full-fledged industry. specialized workshops employed engravers, metalworkers, polishers, and gem cutters. Designs were replicated with molds, and innovations like hinges, clasps, and even mechanical lockets appeared. These innovations weren't just about luxury, they told stories of technology, trade, and talent. The rise of the jeweler meant that human identity could now be engineered as much as expressed. Jewelry became both a craft and a code, a silent testimony to the hands that shaped it and the societies that wore it with pride. As ancient trade routes spread across deserts, seas, and empires, jewelry evolved beyond personal expression or local ritual. It became currency, diplomacy, and a global commodity. A single gemstone might pass through dozens of hands, kingdoms, and languages before landing on the neck of a queen or the hilt of a warrior's sword. Take lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone more prized than gold in the ancient world. Its only known source in antiquity was the Badakhshan mines of modern-day Afghanistan, yet it turned up in Mesopotamian temples, Egyptian tombs, and even in Mycenaean Greece. That means ancient merchants were moving this stone across thousands of miles, through mountain passes, along riverways, and over brutal terrain. All for beauty, yes, but also for what that beauty meant: access, status, and connection. Trade transformed jewelry from a local product to a cross-cultural symbol. The Phoenicians, for instance, acted as intermediaries, sailing from the Levant to North Africa and southern Europe, spreading both their own elegant glass beads and foreign goods. In their wake, Egyptian lotus designs appeared in Iberia, while Assyrian motifs crept into Mediterranean workshops. The Silk Road carried pearls from the Persian Gulf, rubies from India, and jade from China, sometimes making it all the way to Rome. These weren't just materials, they were messages. A Chinese jade hairpin in a Central Asian grave suggested political alliance. A Persian turquoise ring in a Greek market spoke of empires colliding and cultures blending. Jewelry was also used as tribute and bribery. Emperors exchanged it to seal treaties. Rulers paid in it to appease invading armies. Gold bracelets, gemstone-inlaid belts, and pearl-studded diadems acted as political chess pieces. Even among commoners, jewelry took on economic weight. In many ancient societies, jewelry functioned as portable wealth, especially for women. A bride's dowry might include coin bracelets or rings, serving both as adornment and emergency savings. If needed, she could sell a necklace to survive famine, fund a journey, or pay a debt. In essence, ancient jewelry was the world's first global brand, recognizable across borders, adaptable to local tastes, yet carrying the same timeless message. This is precious, and I am connected to the forces that made it so. From caravans to caravels it travelled with us, part ornament, part passport, part promise. While jewelry often marked status and divinity, it eventually took on one of its most enduring roles, the symbol of love, commitment, and memory. Long before diamond engagement rings became the norm, humans used beads, rings, and bangles to mark relationships, both romantic and sacred. In ancient Egypt, rings were exchanged not just as decorative gifts, but as contracts of union. Circular in shape, with no beginning or end, the ring represented eternity. Couples would exchange rings made of woven reeds, ivory, or gold, often placed on the third finger of the left hand, a tradition based on the belief that this finger held a vein that led directly to the heart, later called the vena amoris. In ancient Rome, betrothal rings called annulus pronibus were made of iron, symbolizing strength and permanence. Some were engraved with portraits of the couple or clasped hands, a motif known as fed, which would persist into medieval Europe and beyond. These rings were more than tokens of affection. They were legally binding, often tied to dowries, inheritances, and the legitimacy of offspring. Other cultures marked romantic bonds through bracelets, necklaces, or amulets worn in pairs. In some tribal societies, lovers exchanged matching talismans made from bone, tooth, or carved wood. items believed to remain spiritually linked no matter how far apart the wearers travelled. Jewellery also played a major role in wedding ceremonies. In India, the tradition of adorning the bride with intricate gold jewellery, including nose rings, anklets, bangles and hairpieces, was both aesthetic and spiritual. Each item carried symbolism: prosperity, protection, fertility. The Mangal Sutra, a black beaded necklace tied by the groom during the wedding, became a symbol of marital status, akin to a Western wedding ring. Across cultures, love jewellery also carried hidden messages. In Renaissance Europe, posy rings were engraved with romantic verses or secret phrases. Some were inscribed inside the band, visible only to the couple. Others held compartments with miniature portraits, locks of hair, or perfumes. Jewellery, in this sense, became an archive of emotion, a compact relic of memory, intention, and bond. It was the tangible form of something invisible: trust, devotion, connection. Worn close to the skin, kissed in moments of longing, passed from generation to generation, it whispered, "You are not forgotten. We are still linked." And long before vows were written down, they were etched in metal and worn with pride. Throughout ancient history, jewellery didn't just decorate the body, it connected it to the divine. Adornments were often charged with spiritual meaning, used not just for beauty or wealth, but to invoke blessings, protect against evil, and mark sacred roles. A necklace was rarely just a necklace. It was a prayer, a barrier, a silent conversation with the gods. In ancient Mesopotamia, priests and priestesses wore elaborately designed pectorals and headpieces during rituals. These weren't accessories, they were spiritual uniforms, crafted to mirror celestial forms or mythological creatures. A single bead might represent a planet. A clasp might depict a god's weapon. Jewellery served as a way to physically embody cosmic order. Egypt took this even further. High priests wore items designed to channel the power of the gods. The Menat necklace, for example, was not only decorative, but was believed to bring fertility and divine favour. Worn by priestesses of Hathor, it was often shaken like a rattle during ceremonies to please the goddess. The famous Usek collar, seen in countless Egyptian paintings, was a solar symbol, its curve mimicking the path of the sun god Ra across the sky. Across ancient India, jewellery played a vital role in both Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Earrings, bangles, and anklets were thought to stimulate energy points on the body, aligning the chakras and promoting spiritual well-being. Gold was associated with purity and immortality, often reserved for deities and sacred rites. Statues of gods were adorned with intricate gold jewellery, echoing the belief that the divine deserved and demanded earthly riches. In the Americas, the Maya and Aztecs viewed jade as a sacred stone far more valuable than gold. It symbolized life force, breath, and divine energy. Priests wore jade pendants shaped like deities, and rulers were buried with jade in their mouths to carry their soul into the afterlife. Even in early Christianity, amulets and medallions inscribed with crosses or saints' images were worn to ward off plague, demons, or temptation. Jewellery, here, wasn't just pious, it was protective. Whether worn by a humble farmer or a high priest, ancient spiritual jewellery spoke to a shared human impulse to seek protection, favour, and meaning from beyond. A sacred shimmer, a divine thread, a way to carry the heavens, not in the sky, but around your neck. As ancient civilizations rose and fell, their jewellery remained, buried in tombs, hidden in ruins, or passed hand to hand across generations. What started as beads on a string evolved into something far more powerful, a vessel of memory, a statement of identity, and sometimes the only clue left behind. In burial sites from Scandinavia to Nubia, jewellery offers intimate portraits of the dead. A brooch might reveal cultural origin. A ring might suggest marital status. A necklace made of mixed materials might hint at long-distance trade or migration. Even the way jewellery was worn, layered across the chest, looped through hair, or hidden under garments, tells us how people saw themselves and how they wanted to be remembered. And remember, these items were meant to outlast their wearers. They were passed on as heirlooms, tokens of continuity in times of change. A mother's pendant might be worn by her daughter on a wedding day. A warrior's ring might be buried with his son. Jewellery became a bridge between past and present, often more durable than stories, more personal than monuments. In times of exile or crisis, jewellery was also a means of preserving identity. During the fall of cities or forced migrations, people took only what they could carry, and jewellery was both portable wealth and emotional ballast. A simple bangle might hold more meaning than an entire home left behind. The materials themselves aged gracefully. Gold doesn't rust, gems don't rot. So jewellery, unlike textiles or food offerings, could survive millennia. And in doing so, it preserved human fingerprints, not just physically, but metaphorically. You can almost feel the pride, the love, the ritual, and the pain in every scratch, clasp, and missing stone. Even today, we echo these ancient instincts. We inherit wedding rings. We wear necklaces with initials. We place lockets near our hearts. We keep jewellery in boxes, not for their market value, but for the people they remind us of. So as we look back at the origins of ancient jewellery, we're not just studying fashion or metallurgy, we're studying human longing. The longing to be seen, to be protected, to belong, and ultimately, to be remembered, wrapped in gold, strung in shell, cast in bronze. The story of jewellery is the story of us, durable, personal, eternal. Beneath the peaceful wheat fields and sleepy roads of northern France lies something no one expects, a massive underground city carved directly into soft chalk. Just outside the village of Naours, near the Somme River, sits one of the most unusual archaeological mysteries in Europe, a sprawling subterranean labyrinth made up of over 300 rooms, stretching more than 3 kilometres in length. Descend just 33 metres, and you're no longer in rural Picardy. You're in a ghost city carved into stone. It's easy to miss. On the surface, there's only a small entrance on a wooded slope. But step inside, and the cool air greets you like a secret. The passages widen. They twist. They open into hidden chambers, stables, kitchens, even a chapel. Some rooms are connected with long, low-ceilinged corridors. Others are isolated dead ends, perhaps meant for storage, or something more secretive. It feels less like a cave and more like someone turned the underworld into a village. What's most unsettling isn't just the scale, it's the silence of its origins. No definitive record tells us why or when the Naours complex was first built. Estimates suggest that construction began sometime in the Middle Ages, possibly between the 9th and 13th centuries. But was it meant as a refuge, a monastic retreat, or something else entirely? The walls don't say. One popular theory is that local monks or villagers began digging the tunnels as a way to escape Viking raids or later invasions during the 100 Years' War. It would have made perfect sense. The chalk is soft and easy to excavate, and the network is cleverly ventilated, meaning fires could be lit without suffocating occupants. It was also virtually invisible from above, making it the perfect hideout. Over time, the city beneath Naours evolved. Wells were dug. Smoke chimneys were hidden inside tree trunks above ground. Horses were even stabled in the depths, far from enemy sight. And yet, despite its engineering genius, the site vanished from collective memory, until it was rediscovered by a priest and amateur archaeologist in the 19th century. And that's just the beginning. Because what started as a potential medieval refuge would later become a sanctuary, a curiosity, and a canvas for soldiers in one of the bloodiest wars in history. But down here, surrounded by carved walls and uncertain purpose, one thing is clear. Naours wasn't built in fear. It was built to endure. Walking through Naours is like stepping into the blueprint of an invisible civilization. The walls, cool and chalky to the touch, tell a story of centuries of carving, done entirely by hand, one swing of a pickaxe at a time. There are no traces of machinery, no signs of hasty excavation. Instead, what you find is precision, intention, and layers of human labour, generations shaping their own underground refuge. The soft chalk of the region, known as cray, made digging relatively easy, at least compared to harder rock. But the real challenge wasn't excavation, it was engineering. How do you build an underground settlement without collapsing it? How do you ventilate a multi-level network without anyone above noticing? The people of Naurs figured it out. The rooms are arranged with uncanny logic. There are living spaces, small enough to warm with body heat or a fire, storage rooms where food could be kept cool for months, and communal halls that suggest some kind of organised, even planned society below the surface. Entire sections were reserved for animals, especially horses, indicating that whoever used Naurs intended to live underground not for days, but for weeks or longer. Most striking are the ventilation shafts. Dozens of them snake from the depths to the surface, hidden among the trees and foliage above. Some were disguised with plants or debris to avoid detection by outsiders. The airflow they provided meant that people could cook, breathe, and survive, in secret. Smoke from fires would drift away undetected, vanishing into the forest canopy. Evidence suggests the site may have taken centuries to complete, slowly expanded room by room as needed. There is no sign of forced labour or rapid construction. It appears to be a community effort, probably maintained and improved over generations. This was no military fort, no castle built by decree. It was a place born of necessity, cooperation, and quiet innovation. The craftsmanship is not luxurious, but it is efficient. Doorways are rounded, ceilings are reinforced, walls are smoothed, not crumbling. Even without ornament, there's beauty in the geometry, in the repetition, in the sheer will it took to make this place real. And perhaps that's why Naur has endured. It wasn't just carved from chalk, it was carved from a deep human instinct to protect, preserve, and prepare for the worst. While no definitive records exist to name the original builders of Naurs, whispers from history suggest a likely group of early tenants. Monks. During the Middle Ages, northern France was no stranger to invasion, first from Vikings, then during later conflicts like the 100 Years' War. Monastic communities often stood on the front lines of instability, and many chose to carve sanctuaries beneath their chapels. Naurs, with its isolated location and sprawling subterranean space, fits that pattern almost perfectly. Clues supporting this theory lie in the layout itself. Among the hundreds of rooms, there is a central chapel, carved with a simple altar and arching ceiling. Though plain, it holds spiritual gravity. The room was clearly designed for congregational worship, with space for a small gathering, and even faint etchings along the walls, perhaps verses or symbols now lost to time. This wasn't a storeroom or a defensive bunker. It was a sanctuary in the truest sense. The monks may have started the carving process, but they didn't remain the only ones to seek shelter here. As the centuries passed and wars swept across the region, local villagers and peasants took refuge in Naurs. Entire families are thought to have hidden below during sieges or enemy raids, especially when mercenary bands or foreign armies passed through Picardy. According to local oral tradition, the underground city could accommodate up to 3,000 people at once. That's not just a refuge, that's a hidden population centre, operating in total silence beneath the enemy's boots. Imagine the dark corridors filled with quiet whispers, the smell of smoke, the soft clinking of pots and tools, the occasional cry of a child, all happening beneath the surface while danger loomed above. And yet, despite the fear that likely brought people underground, Naurs offered more than safety. It offered dignity. People weren't crammed into caves like animals. They had rooms, passageways, space to breathe, pray, and wait. There were rules, organisation, and probably a hierarchy. Who got which room? Who watched the shafts? Who rationed food? The answers are lost, but the design suggests social structure, not chaos. In many ways, Naurs wasn't just a hiding place, it was a parallel society. Quiet, shadowed, and utterly self-reliant. Built not out of luxury, but out of necessity. And in doing so, it kept communities alive, without anyone above even knowing they were there. For centuries, the underground city of Naurs quietly served its purpose, sheltering monks, villagers, and perhaps entire generations from wars and raids. And then, just as mysteriously as it had been carved, it vanished from memory. By the 18th century, few in the surrounding region even knew it existed. The entrance had been overgrown, the stories faded, the city below swallowed not by earth, but by time. How does a city disappear? Slowly, bit by bit. As peace returned to northern France, the need for subterranean refuge declined. People returned to farms and fields. Families grew more permanent roots above ground. Oral histories thinned with each generation, and eventually, no one remembered to tell the next child that beneath their feet lay an entire civilization of chalk. There's no record of its use during the Napoleonic Wars, no mention during France's Revolution. The 19th century passed with barely a whisper of the tunnels. It became local myth, a story for children, a cautionary tale about hidden rooms and ghostly monks. Until one day in the 1880s, curiosity brought it back to light. A Catholic priest named Father Ernest Danicourt had an amateur interest in archaeology. He had heard the whispers. A shepherd boy spoke of a hollow sound beneath his feet. The locals thought he was mad, but Danicourt persisted. He began clearing away debris and brush at a strange depression in the land, and what he found shocked even the skeptics. Down in the dark, with only lanterns and rope, he uncovered rooms, hundreds of them, each more elaborate than the last. He was the first person in perhaps 150 years to walk those halls. He cleaned them, mapped them, and began cataloguing the site. In time, he opened it to the public as a curiosity. Visitors arrived to see the city beneath the earth, wondering how something so massive could be hidden in plain sight. And yet, even Danicourt never fully understood its origins. The medieval timelines were speculative. The purpose of some rooms remained unclear. Why were some passages sealed? Who had carved the deeper, more narrow tunnels? The more he uncovered, the more questions rose from the chalky walls. Naurs had returned, but only as a puzzle. A hauntingly empty stage with no actors left. A city remembered not through documents, but through silence, shadows, and rooms that had patiently waited for someone to come back. Just a few decades after Father Danicourt rediscovered Naurs, the peaceful fields of Picardy were torn apart by a new kind of horror, the First World War. Trench warfare turned northern France into a blood-soaked labyrinth of mud, barbed wire, and artillery craters. And while the war raged above, something extraordinary happened below. Naurs became a secret sanctuary once again. French, British, Australian, and even Canadian soldiers passed through the region as part of the Somme offensive, one of the deadliest campaigns of the entire war. Many of them found themselves near the village of Naurs, and some were taken underground, perhaps for shelter, perhaps for curiosity, perhaps for a brief moment of quiet away from the thunder above. But they didn't just visit, they left their mark. On the soft chalk walls of Naurs are more than 2,000 inscriptions, carved carefully by soldiers. Names, ranks, regiments, dates, even hometowns. It became a kind of underground guest book, a human time capsule etched in stone. Some signatures are elaborate, complete with military insignia. Others are heartbreakingly simple. Tom, 1916. J. Carter, 14th Battalion. It wasn't vandalism, it was memory, written by men who knew they might never return home. Many of these soldiers were Australian, from the Australian Imperial Force. Their graffiti is among the most numerous. Historians believe soldiers were brought to Naurs for brief rest periods or as part of local reconnaissance. The site may have reminded them of home, of cave systems like the Jenolan Caves in New South Wales. Or maybe it was just the sheer wonder of stepping out of trench hell into an ancient city of stone. Some carved dates just days before the Battle of the Somme began in July 1916. Many of those names never made it back to Australia or England or Canada, but their writing did. Their presence still lingers in the dim corridors, not ghosts, but echoes. In recent years, researchers have used these inscriptions to trace family histories and even reconnect descendants to soldiers lost in the war. Naurs, once a forgotten refuge, became a living memorial, not through monuments or parades, but through handwriting, scratched into stone by men facing the abyss. Down here, amid the silence, their words still whisper, "I was here. I mattered. Don't forget me." What makes Naurs so haunting isn't just its vastness or mystery, it's the graffiti. Thousands of inscriptions carved into the chalk walls, not by medieval monks or refugees, but by soldiers of World War I, young men trapped in a war that had erased any sense of normalcy. These weren't random scrawls or mindless doodles. They were deliberate, careful, and intensely human. A name carved into stone becomes a voice refusing to vanish. Over 2,000 such inscriptions have been catalogued so far, most of them bearing names, ranks, battalion numbers, and dates. Some are precise: Penrach Kelly, 3rd Battalion, AIF, March 1916. Others are more cryptic, just initials, a year, maybe a single word like home or peace. The chalk walls became a canvas for memory, each letter scratched out with the same discipline they applied to their rifles. Many soldiers carved their names in clusters, groupings of men from the same battalion, often side by side. In one section of the tunnels, Australian soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions carved entire walls, turning them into unofficial regimental memorials. It wasn't about ego, it was about being remembered. In the chaos of war, there was something grounding about leaving behind a mark, an act of quiet defiance against the oblivion of death. Some went further. They carved their hometowns, Sydney, Perth, Manchester. They scratched crosses, kangaroos or military insignia into the walls. A few even etched short messages. "Goodbye France," one soldier wrote. Another simply carved, "Still alive." And then there are the dates, many of them in 1916, just weeks or even days before the Battle of the Somme, where tens of thousands would be killed within hours. The eerie proximity of these peaceful carvings to the slaughter above makes Naur feel like a moment of suspended time, a breath before the storm. Today, these inscriptions have become the focus of military historians and genealogists. Names once lost to history are being reconnected to families. Some descendants now walk the same tunnels, tracing the same letters with their fingers, knowing that their grandfather or great-uncle stood here, laughed here, maybe wept here, before climbing back into the noise of war. Naur is no longer just an archaeological site. It's a living document, carved not in paper, but in stone. A place where voices from the past still linger, refusing to be forgotten. After the Great War, Naur fell silent once more. The soldiers were gone, many of them forever, and the underground city returned to its quiet, chalky gloom. The names they carved faded under layers of dust, soot, and moisture. The once active tunnels became a curiosity again, visited occasionally, but mostly forgotten by history. Peace, it seems, also has a way of burying things. In the decades that followed, the underground complex saw sporadic attention. It was reopened to the public during the interwar period, and again after World War II. Tourism brochures in the 1950s and 60s advertised Naurs as a quaint medieval oddity, La Cité Souterraine, but few truly understood what they were walking through. Most visitors wandered through the dim corridors without realizing that they were brushing past the names of thousands of soldiers, etched silently into the walls behind them. Worse still, the site began to suffer from neglect and casual damage. Lighting installations scorched the delicate chalk. Graffiti and modern markings were added, sometimes right next to century-old inscriptions. Dust, mould, and vibration from tourism slowly eroded parts of the structure. And all the while, the true historical significance of what lay within remained buried under souvenir shop interpretations and surface-level storytelling. The inscriptions were there, hiding in plain sight, but no one was really looking. It wasn't until 2014, almost a full century after World War I, that Naur would reclaim its voice. A team led by Gilles Prilot, a French archaeologist, stumbled upon the extent of the soldier graffiti while conducting a routine survey of the site. What he found wasn't just a few scattered names, it was a vast, undocumented war archive carved by hand. He realised that Naurs wasn't just a medieval refuge or a tourist stop, it was a time capsule, a spiritual annex to the war itself. This discovery reignited interest in Naur. Conservation efforts began, digital scans were made, and the graffiti was catalogued for historical research. Families from as far away as Australia and Canada came to see the signatures of ancestors who never returned. Still, the silence of those lost decades lingers. For nearly 100 years, the most poignant messages in Naurs were hidden, not by secrecy, but by neglect. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that the soldiers carved their names into the stone, but that we forgot to look for them. The 2014 rediscovery of Naur's wartime graffiti changed everything. What had been marketed as a quirky underground attraction was suddenly recognised for what it truly was: a sacred record of lives interrupted, carved into the earth by men preparing to die. Overnight, Naurs was transformed from a tourist stop to a site of international historical significance. Leading the rediscovery was archaeologist Gilles Prilot, whose work began as a simple preservation study. But as he and his team ventured deeper into the tunnels, they realised they weren't just cataloguing medieval architecture. They were standing in a World War I archive, inscribed not on paper, but into the walls themselves. The team found over 2,000 names, many from the Australian Imperial Force, meticulously carved into chalk between 1916 and 1917. Prilot described it as the largest underground concentration of First World War inscriptions ever found. It wasn't just a few soldiers passing through, it was a steady stream of men, taking shelter from the war above and leaving behind their final thoughts in stone. The discovery sparked an international response. Researchers began cross-referencing the names with military records, identifying individuals, units, and fates. Families in Australia, the UK, and Canada were contacted. Some learned for the first time that their grandfathers or great-uncles had passed through Naurs. Others discovered that the names on medals and telegrams were etched into chalk half a world away. Meanwhile, efforts to restore and preserve the site accelerated. Sections of the underground city were scanned using 3D imaging. Lighting was improved to protect the chalk walls, and interpretive displays were updated to reflect the site's new significance. Portions of the inscriptions were sealed off from visitors to prevent further erosion. What emerged was not just a story of archaeology, but one of reconnection. People came to Naur not to marvel at stone walls, but to touch history. To trace a carved name with their fingertips and feel, just for a moment, the heartbeat of a long-dead soldier. It wasn't just about honouring the dead, it was about listening to what they left behind. Through these efforts, Naurs was no longer a forgotten footnote. It became what it always was, a message in the dark, waiting patiently for the world to remember. Today, the underground city of Naurs is more than just a marvel of medieval engineering or a relic of wartime memory. It is a symbol of resilience, human creativity, and the strange intimacy between survival and silence. It stands not as a monument to one moment, but as a layered palimpsest of human history, each corridor echoing a different era's fears, hopes, and choices. What began as a possible monastic hideaway evolved into a full-fledged subterranean refuge, then into a forgotten curiosity, and finally into an accidental war memorial carved by its own witnesses. In this way, Naurs defies classification. It is not just a historical site. It's a psychological space, a place that has housed prayer, fear, routine, and rest across centuries. The cold chalk walls have absorbed the breath of monks, villagers, and soldiers alike. Each left something behind. In the modern era, Naurs has become a place of reflection, especially for descendants of the World War I soldiers who inscribed their names there. Visiting the tunnels today isn't like entering a battlefield or a museum. It's like entering a shared memory, one that was once buried and now breathes again. You walk not just through stone, but through testimony. It has also become a site of collaboration between nations. French and Australian historians now work together to match inscriptions with military records. School children are brought through the tunnels to learn about history in the most visceral way possible, by seeing what someone else carved with their own hands during a time when they weren't sure they'd survive the week. Perhaps most powerful is what Naurs teaches us about legacy. It was built not with glory in mind, but out of necessity. Yet it endured, and over time, its quiet persistence became its strength. It reminds us that history isn't just told in speeches and statues. It's whispered into chalk, hidden in dark corners, waiting patiently for someone to remember. Naurs is not loud. It doesn't shout, but it endures. And in doing so, it speaks to the enduring human instinct to carve meaning into the places we fear the most, and to leave behind a mark that says simply, "We were here. We mattered."